All right, let's get into it. So I wanted to have just a general conversation about the new moon, some energies that I felt were coming in, some things that I've been working through and exploring and learning, and just kind of get back into the habit of sharing more, putting myself out there, giving others access to some of these tools and ways that you can work with them. I've had some very personal realizations and insights into my own energy through the lens of human design, which is just one that I'm familiar with and have worked with. I've had a lot of other modalities come into play as well, and I'll get into some of that as we go. I do have to say, I actually recorded like probably about an hour's worth of content yesterday, and about like I don't know, I started really getting into I started getting really into like a human design bit of the conversation, and I just like completely kind of shut down. And I'm used to that. Like, I don't want to admit that, but that's true. And I think it's really important for me to remain honest and vulnerable in this space, because that's where I know I'm growing, and I know that other people are going to be able to like see, oh, like this happens, and how do you overcome that, right? Like, how do you say like, oh, like I don't know enough about human design to really be sharing it. And what I was trying to do, I was trying to just talk deeply about the root center. So I'll just go to my chart just to make this simple. So the root center is here at the bottom of our chart. If you're familiar with the chakra systems, you're familiar with the root center. It was interesting the other day, I'm intellectually aware of the root center, right? I'm like, oh, the root center, yeah, the root center, like, okay, cool. But the other day, my spiritual teacher, we were in class, and she was walking us through the chakras, and we were just kind of like clearing them out, making sure that they were like running properly. And she starts with the root center, and I just started laughing. I was like, I have no idea like where that is or how that feels. And so from that moment, I had been working more directly with it. And in my mind, though, like yesterday when I was explaining this, I was like, well, I've only been working with it for like 2 or 3 days, so I don't really know for sure. And it's like, that's okay. Like, this is like, life is experimental. The human design system itself is an experiment. I think that's one reason I've always found it uncomfortable to attempt to talk about it, because I've never really resonated with it the way that like Ra Uru Hu or whoever intended it to be taught. And it's not to say that those principles and foundations don't have their purpose, because they do. They're definitely part of the tool. And for me, it was different. It was about, what does having an open spleen feel like in my body? What does having an open root feel like in my body? And not only is my root open and my spleen open, but looking at how the gates that surround them are showing up. So like in my spleen, for example, there's no gates there. So like, how does like that space, so for me, that's like energetically, it's this right side of my body. It is connecting down into the root through these gates and channels, right? And then the root for me, when I kind of stepped into that, and I think part of the reason I before had a little bit more, it felt more simple to connect to this open center, because it was like, oh, anything I'm feeling there, maybe I just need to like separate from a little bit, and it gave me a lot of space. Whereas, when I'm getting into these other centers where I'm open, there are gates coming off. So there are aspects of myself that are connected to any sort of like experience I'm having coming through these open energy centers. And I think that when it came to my roots specifically, there was a bit of an overwhelm, being like, okay, well, like some of the energy I feel down here is like definitely mine, and just a bit of an overwhelm, because I think the root is about adrenaline. It's about like um there's like an action element to it, and the importance of the action element to it is that there is a pulse. There's like a correct movement, and sometimes the correct movement is no movement. And in a world where we have been conditioned to go go go, those no movement moments can be very difficult on our minds and on our psyches, if we are believing that conditioning sort of like, okay, like you gotta go, you gotta grind, you gotta like get out there, go find the thing, do the thing. Whereas like human design and a lot of spiritual tools and practices and metaphysics are going to teach you kind of the exact opposite, in terms of, honoring the self, honoring the body, the soul, the spirit. There's so many different layers to you as a person. You've got your soul, you've got your body, you've got your emotions. You have all of these different layers. You have the etheric body, the astral body. There's so many aspects of the self that if any of them are running off a little bit, they're going to all affect one another. And even the definitions and the things that you are here to bring into the world, if they're being distorted by all of this stuff that you have picked up and wanted to try to like learn about, and you're like, oh, I want to get all into, like pretty girl culture, and getting all into the adrenalized reality, but I'm not here to do that. It distorts me from speaking my truth, from acting in my personal integrity, and in doing the work that I'm meant to do, right? And I feel like this is going to be a forever experience for me. And I get really hard on myself, because I'm like, oh, like, well, I don't know like every detail. And the part of me yesterday, when I kind of stepped back and was like, oh my god, I'm not going to teach, like I can't do this, I had actually opened up one of my books and was reading from that, and I was feeling like all anxious because I couldn't find like the details I wanted, and like I couldn't figure out like what I was trying to get at, because like I said, I was reading through my books, just getting the information that I was feeling called to share in that moment. And I just like turned it down, shut it down, turned it off. And the beauty though of it, and the reason I feel like I'm persisting through that, and I'm showing back up today and giving myself this opportunity to actually channel these messages, hear what I have to say, share these insights with others, is because I had actually reached out to 4 really close friends of mine who during the pandemic had been there through the very beginnings of me beginning to share. In the pandemic, I was doing a lot of like Instagram lives, and we were doing a lot of Zoom collective conversations and getting together like almost like weekly, I think, just talking about what was going on, insights we were having. I mean, I was a little bit deep into like conspiracy theory stuff, I have to be very honest, and that's okay. Like I think it's important that we explore different ways of thinking, because if I'm just like watching CNN every day and like just like taking that for face value, I don't know that I'm getting the complete story. Like there's a lot happening, and like if you look, like I was a history major in college, so I'm very aware of propaganda and like the idea that, you know, like not everything is what you've been told it is, because that's kind of like what has happened to me over time. And like as I was growing up, you know, I would like believe in like authority and what the people were telling me. And then like at a certain point, you know, for example, it happened with religion. I grew up Catholic. I was in it with the Jesus myth. I was like, heck yeah, Jesus, he's like, he is the guy. Like we, you know, you live your truth like he did. That's what you do. Like, that's what's up. Like, it's like, I felt that I had that connection with him, and I had that connection then with the church. And then the first strike for the Catholic Church for me was when I finally took world religions and opened my eyes to other religions and realized, like, wait a minute, like, how is it just like this one religion is right, or Jesus is the only one who could ever like channel that? And you know, the closer I get to Jesus now, like I'm still close to Jesus. And you know, we've rekindled our friendship since I left, and it's very apparent that's the truth. You know, it's like, oh, he's like, yeah, I'm just an example. The people around me, they were living in the Christ consciousness with me. Like, that's it. Like, that's the point. Anyway, so that was first strike, where I'm like, okay, so like we're all in Israel, Palestine, fighting over the Holy Land, when really all three of our Abrahamic religions are Abrahamic religions, and they're all offshoots of one another, but we're fighting wars over it. We're killing each other. This seems out of place. That was strike one. Strike two for me was the Gospel of Mary, which people have told me is or isn't what I think it is. But even still, it was kind of this, it was just this moment of like, okay, so like there's all this information that you're hiding from everyone. Because I remember finding out about Mary, having this Gospel of Mary, and being like, well, like, why don't people know about this? Like, I remember feeling like I was, I was, you know, 17 years old, bringing this information to adults in my life. And I was like, okay, well, like, what's going on here? And then strike three for me is just the Catholic Church, you know, the priest situation, that whole situation. It's gross, it's terrible. I shunned religion then for, you know, and not only religion, spirituality. I was like, well, I guess I'm an atheist now. I just went to like the other extreme of it when I was in college, and that's okay. And I just remember always being like, I can't really be an atheist. Like, that just didn't resonate with me. I was like, I don't know. I was like, I guess I'm agnostic. Like, whatever. So, you know, that's just an example of a time in my life where I the veil was lifted from my eyes, and I was seeing reality for what it was, like this larger thing. And it happened again as a history major in college. I just kind of fell into history as a major. And that was the thing that drew me to it, though, is I was like, well, I'd sat in history class, you know, from kindergarten to 12th grade. And, you know, they just kind of like regurgitated like the good old American story, you know. And like, even if you were learning about Britain or China, you were learning about it from like the American like perspective of things, like in a way. And just, it was very like cut and dry. And then when I got to college, it started being like less about the people in power stories. And I think that's it, more than just necessarily like the Americanized version. It's like people in power story versus just the people, like, you know, the regular degular, you know, your neighbor with the dog, you know, your teacher, your friends, your coworkers. Like, I started reading their stories, and that was when I was like, oh, like it was like another, oh. And then it, you know, it's happened a lot over time. And during the pandemic, I was exploring more conspiracy minded theories of things, which makes a lot of sense if you go into kind of my history then with my partner, and like our whole thing and his whole thing and all of that. And like, it was part of my healing. And it's not to say that everything I read was a lie. And I was definitely out there doing like some, secret space program type stuff. And I was just really deep, but that's okay. I was also really deep into prayer and self love and ceremony work and flowers and all sorts of things that I think really like balanced out the other parts of me that were exploring like things that I wasn't sure about, because that's the thing. I think I watch a lot. I let myself explore different viewpoints because I think it's very important to have a wide breadth of potential. I think it's, at least for me, it's not a good idea to limit myself to just like one train of thought, um, especially when it comes to things that others are telling me are true, and trying to force me to see. I don't know. I just don't trust, like, I don't really trust the media. I don't trust it. I just like something about it. I'm like, like I'm back on the Instagram app, and like I've already noticed like I've spent an hour on there today, and I'm like, they just want you on their apps. And it's like so tough because it's tough because I want to connect with you. Like I want to connect with the people in my life. I want to share. I want to hear what you're up to. I want to know like what cool events you're getting into and like what you're creating and what you've learned. And I am just having such a difficult time agreeing to these algorithmic spaces. So I guess that's just for me. For the new moon, I had channeled some sort of like concepts and things the other day, and I just decided to kind of put them with like these kind of new moon spaces. I'm not going to get so hard on myself about like schedules and time, and you got to do it, because like to me, if I'm forcing it, it's not real. It's not going to happen. I'm not going to follow through. Like I know myself. So I just want to give myself like a general framework of working with the moons again, and like welcoming back these conversations and just seeing what comes of it, and what I can help anybody who feels resonant with these videos or this sort of container space that I create when I do this, is resonant with, and that helps them too. So this new moon is bringing in the energy of sacred templates, and I thought that was, for me, like this is my sacred template. Like seeing my human design chart was very eye-opening and soul expanding for me. It was at a time in my life where I was lost. And I still feel a bit of that lost energy, and at the same time it definitely isn't as lost as I was then. I was really caught up in other people's stories. I was really, and not to say that's still something I'm working with, but anyway, I was just really caught up in like everybody else's images of me. I was caught up in drugs. I was caught up in partying. At the time, I wasn't working at all. I had like totaled my car, and I was just in. It was really the first time I took the time to go in, and it was not it wasn't as skillful as I feel like I can be now when I go in. And I'm grateful I did it because it kind of set the groundwork and the framework for what I've become. And I would basically just spend every day, I would wake up in the morning I was living with my partner and a friend at the time, and it was like our house was everybody's house. Like I was just like in it with the group, with the community, waking up, doing, we would smoke, we would drink a bunch of coffee, we would eat breakfast, and we would be totally 100% enmeshed with each other. They would go to work, people would come home, we would drink and smoke and chill and listen to music. And it was though in that space where they were all at work, right? Because I wasn't working. I was at the house. It was in that space where I started going in. So, I was working very heavily with marijuana medicine at the time, and I still work with that medicine, just definitely not at the same extremes and with the same level of like detachment from reality. I needed that at the time though. Like I said, in college, I had spent about 4 years telling myself I was agnostic and and atheist, and I didn't believe in God, and I wasn't a spiritual person. And so that was a really, really tough thing. I actually remember it was probably like 20, probably about 4 or 5 years after we graduated from college, where I was with um some of my college friends. I want to say we were in Philadelphia or New York. We were all together though, and I remember mentioning this to one of my friends and saying like, yeah, I've gotten back into my spiritual practices since graduating, and I was like, I think that was really detrimental to me, college. And I remember them looking me in the eyes and being like, yeah, I can really see that as like true for you. And I'm really glad and grateful to hear, that you're back on this path and that you found this again, because, like, even though like that was a hard time for you, like, that's when I learned to love you and I learned to care about you. And I'm kind of crying because I am so grateful for my community while I was in college. Um, I feel like they saw what in me was for me some of like the hardest, most deep shadows parts of myself. And I was not integrated, I was just like kind of seeing those things. I was drinking a lot, which I'm not doing anymore, and I'm very grateful for. I'm grateful for the gift of like being able to see both layers of that. And anyway, back to my story. I just remember though living with these men. And there were women involved too in the space, but my roommate, the person I was on lease list with, the man, I had a partner. It was a lot of male energy in the space. The female energy was definitely pushed out for me, and that makes sense too, because my college experience was very female focused, and to then have a shift when I came out and do a fully kind of like male focused energy really like makes sense for me and like my personal experience with extremes. Gate 15 is about extremes. That shows up for people in different ways. I have a lot of friends with it, and they have the extremes, and it shows up for us in different ways, right? Like my extremes can often show up, if I look at my substance usage. I don't drink at all. The only alcohol that I ingest is whatever the flower essences are preserved in, and the very trace amounts found in kombucha. I tried to not do kombucha, but I prefer drinking kombucha than to not. But I don't drink alcohol at all, and that's partially because I learned a really deep lesson with alcohol and my own personal body's makeup. And with it, I was like an extreme person. It's like if I were to drink, like it wouldn't just be like, oh, I just have a couple of drinks. Like I saw myself, like I went back and forth. I spent basically from 20, I mean, really, it's even like once I started drinking, I feel like I was always kind of trying to quit, but I really like consciously was choosing to quit around this time that I found human design. A lot of things were kind of falling into place, you know. I was reawakening to my spiritual self of finding like human design and like esoteric systems and ways to see and understand myself and know myself. And yeah, I was just seeing like that, like the way I was treating my body wasn't necessarily um making me experience the fullness of myself. um and you know, I tried to be like, okay, well, like, okay, I see it, so like I'm just going to change it tomorrow. It's taken many years, and it's going to continue taking many years. Like some of like the alcohol specifically took me from the conscious point I saw I needed to quit in 2014 up until my last drink in 2021. So 7 years, and the 7 years is really important. 7 years, it takes 7 years for yourselves to really transform, for you to really transform, for something to like fully integrate into yourself. When my partner passed away, his cousin was like, MK, this is going to take us 7 years to like fully integrate emotionally this experience. And that's correct. You know, I'm about halfway through that particular 7 year cycle of integrating and grieving. And I don't think like the grief and the integration process will ever be like completely over. And I can see though, like in 7 years, it having like a different like layer, maybe like a stronger skin, you know, like where something's grown. You know, I'm kind of in the middle of it right now, and you know, there's a lot for me to deal with around that. I'm not sure if that's a conversation for today, and that is definitely kind of a conversation that's always happening for me. So I'm living with these boys. It's like, you know, I haven't talked to God in years, like really, really talked to God. You know, I always had like I remember being blackout drunk and like going to bed one night and like just literally like praying in the background of my mind. It's like, I don't remember how I remember this prayer, but I remember it being in the background. And I look back to that point a lot because I'm like, okay, so like even in my like lowest, like I don't believe in God days, I was like there, like talking to God and with God and in communion with God. So here I am, like a few years later, like exploring myself, like getting into like different things, a little bit of like a wook lifestyle, if you're familiar with that language. And I would basically, all of the people I was living with, you know, would go about their days, and I would have the afternoon to myself. And pretty much every single day, I would go for a walk and I would listen to basically the same playlist and have kind of the same like daydream. And I would go to a bookstore and I would just sit in the metaphysical astrology section for however long and just explore and read and like get, you know, get involved in that. And one day, and it's crazy to me, I don't have the book. It's like the other day I was like, wait, I don't have my original human design book, which is honestly baffling. I hope it's at my parents' house. Otherwise, I might have to get this book again. But I remember one day this book just appeared. You know, it's like I spent pretty much every day there. I was very, very familiar with the books that were available in this section. And one day it was this red book, and it was said, Understanding Your Human Design. And it was by this woman named Karen Curry. And I picked it up and I started flipping through it, and I was like, this is it. I didn't know what, but I was like, this is it. And so I don't remember if I like looked at my chart at that moment or if I bought the book first, but either way, I bought the book, I looked at my chart, and I'm like, this is it. This is it. I found it. This is it's done. It's over. You know, whatever, you know. Um I had no clue though. And I remember my friends being like, "Can you explain it to us? Explain it to us." And I'm like, "What do you mean? I just found it. Like I literally just discovered this I just discovered that this is me energetically and now you want me to explain it? Like are you kidding me?" And I was so overwhelmed, and I've spent a lot of time being overwhelmed by what I see, what I know, and like other people's pressure to have me explain what I see and what I know, and me like feeling like, oh my God, I have no capacity to do it. Like, oh my God, and I get all overwhelmed. And patience is a beautiful gift. And I feel a little bit more comfortable speaking about what I see and what I know, and admitting like there's still layers to this that are a complete mystery to me. For example, like where does this chart come from? Like, can somebody tell me, please? Like, what are the mechanics behind creating this human design chart? Because I don't fully know that. All I know is I put my birth information into these systems. This isn't the only site you can get your birth chart from. This is just kind of the one, or your human design chart from. This is just the one I've sort of landed on because it I like having this other information. I just like its layout. It's just worked for me for the however many years. Um so yeah, so I discovered my sacred template human design chart in 2014. I was kind of a shell of a person, but I had that fire, and that to me is what's most important. Is like, even if you're in a really low, like, I don't know who I am, I'm drinking every day of the week, like I'm enmeshed in everybody's stories but my own, like I'm living for the corporate world, whatever. Like I feel like that deep, whatever it is, whatever's like blocking you, it's like having like a passion and a fire to like want to know more and want to see more and want to experience more is a gift. It's going to help you move through those spaces where you may be stuck. And I'm still stuck in spaces. I'm still kind of like confused about how to disengage from thinking I can only work for other people to make money, disengage from like ideas like I'm not worthy. There's like a lot of different things that I know I'm still working with, and even with that, it's like I can still celebrate how far I've come. Um So the first thing that really came to my mind when I was starting to think about sacred templates as a whole concept was, for me, in how close being sacred and being scared are. And that first was just truly in their spellings. I was like writing it out and I was like, oh my God, like if I just accidentally switch these two letters, it's a completely different word with a completely different charge. And I wanted to go into like the deep like etymology of these words. Like I had like a whole, and I'm just like, the more I thought about it, the more I was like, no, I think it's just that when we're stepping into our sacred roles, like we're going to come up to our fears. We're going to see what we're scared of. Like, why aren't we already living our sacred truth? And the deeper and deeper and deeper I go, the more I realize, oh, like I was just like a little kid, like living my truth, living like from my authentic purpose. And then the world outside me was like, oh, like we don't do that. Like, our inner children were told to stop. So like we're gonna protect you and go ahead and stop you in your tracks. And so it's like the deeper and deeper and deeper I go, I'm like, oh, like I just picked something up when I was young and just figuring it out. And who I was learning from, they'd figured out like, oh, if we hide those things, like we will be safe. And it makes sense. I mean, you think of like, I identify with like witches and bitches and goddesses, right? Like I'm in the witch bitch goddess clan. And it's like a quote from like Tumblr from years ago that I just like really like vibed with. I was like, yeah, like I'm a witch, I'm a bitch, I'm a goddess. Like I'm all three of those things. Absolutely. And witches, they get burned at the stake at one point in history. It's like being a witch was like something you could be killed for. And now it's like very much like the available um metaphysical thing you can be, which is cool. Like go witches. And then like bitches, like oh man, like people use that word and they are not they're not speaking highly of women when they use that word. And I think though for me it's like that vagina monologue where the woman reclaims the word cunt, right? And I'm like trying to bleep that out for the internet, like we'll see. But anyway, the woman's like reclaiming this word, and I feel the same way about the word bitch. I'm like, yeah, like, yeah, I'm a bitch. Like, here's the thing, like, I don't want to continue being enmeshed in other people's stuff. Like, I don't want to just keep doing things out of obligation. I'm not nice. Like, I'm not trying to like harbor what like nice means anymore because like I did that for so long as a kid, being like nice and like agreeable and just like, oh, like let me use my gift of grace the way that like you all think you want it to be. And like as I got older, I was like, and it happened when I was a kid where I would like have outbursts where I didn't want to be there, I didn't want to be available, and like I was being forced to, and you have outbursts and things. So, being nice is like not rooted in being kind, which is what people like kind of get those two things different. Like I'm a kind person, but I'm really not trying to be like overly agreeable and just like do things the way everybody wants because it makes them feel comfortable. Like I have to like make sure that I'm fully comfortable and grounded and like on the space. Like me being overly agreeable, like I then cross all of my boundaries in order to like attempt to like make somebody else feel better. When in reality, if my boundaries have been all sorts of crossed, like now everybody's messed up. That's how I feel. And so I'm just trying to, continue getting more clear. I'm like, well, where did the sacred and the scared conversation, but I'm not really sure how I got all the way here. I feel good. I'm gonna pause. I'm gonna get a quick drink. I did not prepare. All right, so I was like, maybe if I walk, I'll like remember everything I was saying. I don't, but that's okay. We're gonna just like keep going with what my notes have. So under the idea of like being sacred and being scared, I wanted to kind of explore the idea of writing sacred declarations. We had done that in my spiritual school, and I had done that for myself, and I'm currently working through a series of flower essences that are linked to 12 weeks worth of concepts alongside my spiritual school. And one of my tasks a week ago was to write the sacred declaration. And I think that there's something very grounding about it that is truthful, right? Like the scared aspect is kind of like in human design terms, like you're not self. It's like, oh, like other people's voices. It's not even necessarily other people's voices. It's just the voices of doubt, of, you're not worthy, you're not safe to do that. You kind of get all these mixed messages, you like have your intuition, you have your, oh, like that's what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna do that, that's where I go next. And then as soon as you do it, there's like 13 different ideas that are like, oh, but maybe you're not good enough. For example, me like almost not finishing these projects when I start them, and be like, oh, well, like, who are you? Who are you to teach other people? I'm like, I'm just Mary. Like, I've always been called to teach. I've always felt, like comfortable talking about my experiences. People tend to like listening to me talk, which like sometimes blows my own mind because I'm like, what? But then I'm like, no, like I could see that. I mean, I get it. Like I love talking to myself. Like part of the reason I got back into I was like, we got to get back into this is because I was sitting in my bathtub doing it for myself every night. And so basically this brings me back around though to um I don't think I finished this story about sitting in the basement during the pandemic and doing these conversations and all of that. So I had reached out last night to 4 people who had been there while I was trying that out for the first time. And I reached out to them and I said, hey, if you want to join me for this Zoom conversation, here's the code. And none of them ended up joining me last night. None of them actually saw the message until today. And all of them were like, I'm sorry I missed it. Let me know when the next one is. Or like, yeah, sorry I couldn't make that one. Like, like we were up to something else, but like definitely like the next time you feel called. And I was just like, oh, I was like, I got all in my head, like, nobody cares, which even if nobody cares, like I know that this is important for me. So I gotta follow through and I gotta see myself through it because there's there's going to be a lot for me personally to take from this, and I know that others are also going to be able to like start having aha moments of their own and just like, oh, like that makes sense, like that's a way you can see this energy. It doesn't have to be so like cut and dry because oh gosh, like traditional human design, man, so freaking cut and dry. And it's just like I actually don't listen to a lot of other human design teachers. I'm interested to see how like putting myself out there as like a human design person expands that for me. I'm hoping that there's like other people I resonate with. I just like I don't really like go out of my way and search for it because I find that it blocks my channel, and it has blocked my channel over time. So back into the idea of what sacred declaration work is, it's similar. I mean, similar to, I guess, affirmations. Some of these things are going to sound like, oh, like that's just an affirmation, and if that's like the language that makes sense to you, go for it. But it's just very much saying like, no, this is who I am, and like, if there's anything in my current like aura space that doesn't believe that, who I am is going to like find out like what that is and help me like clear it, integrate it, see it for what it really is, whatever needs to be done with it. So I'm just going to give you an example of a sacred declaration. I invite you to write your own, to see yourself as you are, and to, let your higher optimal self come through and write a declaration for you. I also invite you to speak it out loud. If you feel called, you can, repeat after me and say these things out loud. Taking in what resonates with you, and yeah. So this was my declaration of being an instrument. I am in peace and harmony with God. I am grateful for my blessings. I am free to cleanse and clear my aura at all times. I keep my whole self protected. What is not mine, I release gently. I walk in grace. I stay in admiration. So it's just really simple and powerful. So I want to step into now the idea of releasing other stuff. That was part of my declaration, and it's the next part of this sacred templates work, and releasing other stuff in in human design terms for me, is very much just a lot of body scanning. And like I said, I mean, just the other day, I was very aware that I haven't really been able to engage with my root center fully up until very recently. And, I think that's partially because of different energies that are associated with it for me, as well as, just other centers like having so much maybe built up in them that I had to clear those first. Like there's a lot of layers to it. Um, but even with that, that doesn't mean that we can't explore this together. Just, do have some grace for me and in my process of like learning and growing with myself, and any sort of like insights others have, like I love a good conversation, and I am intending to do uh larger community work where we can all sit together and talk about insights and things together. I did just want to get out the first layer, both for myself and for others coming into this conversation with me, just to see where I am and see if that resonates with you. So when I'm doing body scans, it's very like general for me. I don't necessarily always go like through all of my chakras or anything. I usually start at my crown. I kind of start at the top and I just kind of like do some scanning work, and I look for places that maybe there's some tension or tightness, pain. Um, and then I go there. And that's kind of how I work with it. And for me, it is fairly pretty much always that it's in one of these three centers that I'm really able to like recognize that sort of like first hit of like, okay, like there's, well, we got some stuff that isn't ours, and I can then start working with my other tools that are for cleansing and clearing and creating separation and space from those things. And I'm just going to kind of give those concepts. I don't want to go too super into detail, because I'm honestly a little bit newer to working with these specific concepts myself, and B, because that's just like not the full conversation. I just want to kind of give a little bit of that of this, because these are four things that have become very, very helpful as visual guides and actual like getting things out of my space. Another thing that I don't have written here is body work. I've been doing body work for years now, and just like energetic work in general, and I cannot speak highly enough of it. I'm currently working with a healer who does like, he's working in my fascia, and I mean he just pretty much just like puts his finger like on my wherever. Like today he worked on my chakras right in here. Um and I mean, just so useful, like truly life-changing work that he's doing with me, and I'm just so grateful for that. So finding body workers that you resonate is so helpful, and releasing any baggage you've picked up, and you start being conditioned and taking things on as soon as you are conceived. You start taking things, uh is you start being programmed at the cellular level. So, everything is like gentleness. So these other concepts that I'm working with, and I'm seeing a lot of like similar to this body worker, like actual change and and shifting going on is working with separation roses and actually like putting up energetic roses between yourself and situations. Um, that has been helpful. The idea of exploding matching pictures. This one is like when you so for here's an example for me. I grew up on like Disney and like romance culture. And so a matching picture that I can explode is kind of like, oh, like love looks like what Belle and the Beast had. I'm sorry. I'm gonna definitely explode that because that was a problematic relationship, you know? And like that's just like one simple example. Just like kind of, oh, like no, that's not there. And for me, when I explode the picture, I kind of like let in some like integrative imagery. I'm working a lot with like gardening imagery and themes. So I have a lot of like coming in and like, using any of that hurt or pain or like whatever as like the soil for my seeds and my plants and like watering and like tending and like, exploding these matching pictures helps to tend the garden and pull up the weeds. And then the next one that I feel comfortable sharing is the grounding cord. This one I feel a little bit more comfortable talking with because it has helped me with my root center and like seeing and feeling it for really what for me feels like the first time. And for me, working with this grounding cord. So the idea is we have a grounding cord that goes from our root center down into the earth to its core and is grounding us then to Mother Earth, right? And the idea of working with this grounding cord is that we can constantly release that grounding cord back into the earth and then have the earth send another fresh, more more appropriate for now grounding cord up to support you. So when I first started working with this, I'm like seeing my grounding cord. It's just like this thin little, my friend said my friend was like seeing the same thing and they were like, oh, it's a tail. That it was like just a little tail. I was like, yes. So I was like, because that's not right. So I just had this tiny little grounding cord, and then every time I release it, it would have all these like dead vines on it. And I was just like, oh, okay, like interesting. So then the other day, my teacher who's teaching me about these concepts, she's like, okay, and your grounding cord is as wide as your hips. And that blew my mind then also for my root center and understanding my root center. I'm like, oh, my root center is, my hips, my lower, that lower dantian, that lower energy body. And for me, it's all the way down my legs and my feet. And it's that whole width. And then that grounding cord is supporting you from the earth. And you, with this grounding cord, you can like send things back down through it. And that's a good way to like release other people's things. Cause like, as you read, I know I used to read a lot on Instagram, people like, oh, like send that back, return to sender, give that back to the other person. Like, that kind of energy just doesn't really resonate with me. I actually like don't really work with that. I don't send things back to people anymore. I I've tried that and that just didn't work for me. For me, things that work or if you really feel comfortable and you think you're in your highest self and you really feel connected and you feel like you're connecting with someone else's higher self, that to me is comfortable and okay, in terms of like giving it back to them. But really what I usually do is do this, I release my grounding cord, and now that it's as wide as my hips, it's less of like a dead viney thing, and like there's still like lushness and things when I'm releasing it, but the resetting just really kind of like brings you back into into the moment and into your body. And then you can release things down through that. with this grounding cord, there's also um a cord that's connecting us to the universe, and it's coming from an untouched place in the universe. And again, same thing where we can like release it and reset it and have it come down and meet the grounding cord from the earth. And you can send things up through that if that feels appropriate. And one of my personal favorites in terms of like returning things to people is working with angels and working with Mother Earth and working with the plants and the spirit energy that way, and the other beings, like the loving beings, like Mother Mary, like she's like a great friend, like Mary Magdalene, she's always back there making jokes with me, and I know that if I was like, girl, can you can you take this and give this to whoever can help with it, like I know she would have my back, because basically uh, I often do this work with like the archangels, where I'll be like, oh, like Saint Michael, like I know this isn't mine. He'll be like, oh, let me go ahead and take that away from you. I'll get it to the guides or the person, I'll get this to where it needs to go safely. You just take care of yourself. Um, that's also very helpful. Just knowing where my aura is also a little bit, has been very helpful. So it's, the entire width of your arms, behind yourself, and really like once I started clearing out my back aura more often, that's been really helpful. um I'm going to get into like some other conversation around like identity shifts and things, and we can like go into more of that. So releasing other people's stuff with human design, um it's like we are obviously connected to each other. We are social beings. During the pandemic, it was very clear that separation from one another was hurtful. It was hurtful. And this post-pandemic world we live in, it still hurts, because I think that people probably saw things in themselves that they haven't been able to integrate. And that's okay, because we're here now and we can support each other in that, and we can support ourselves. And I think knowing and being comfortable with your energy is such a gift. And I do really hope that you find that in yourself, where you really just like are you know when something's yours, and thus you're able to speak on it, share it, make art about it, work with it. And you are also then very wise in what isn't yours, so that way you know where you can be of support for another, and you can then use your gifts and what you do have to be there for them, if that is what is called. So in this, I want to continue on with the next kind of theme under this work, is nurturing a sense of wonder and awe. Um, so I've been like trying to laugh a lot more, and it's like, I've always had like humor. I do think though there was a time where I got very serious, and there were things for me that were always meant to be serious, and like spiritual stuff was like always meant to be serious for me. Like, when I was like a little kid, I was very serious about Jesus. Um, so much so that I was in the school nativity play, like, not smiling, just being so like stern and serious. And I took things so serious as a child. And, I still had humor and whatnot. And though when I came back to my spiritual practices and I started to say, oh, like I know that maybe I don't want to go to like Catholic church, but like I still want to go to church, you know, I still want to celebrate Easter and miracles and magic and God. Like I like all of those things. I just don't necessarily like what the Catholic Church did with those things. But that doesn't mean that those things aren't for me. Um I feel like when I got back into it, I kind of took like a serious demeanor about it. You know, it was like serious. When I used to play like school, I always took it seriously. I thought like teaching was like this serious thing I had to do. But like the deeper I get, the more I do, the more that I connect with different spirit guides, like the funnier it gets. Like the more humor there is. Like I just brought up Mary Magdalene. She's definitely one of my guides. Like my name is Mary Magda. Like she's my girl, you know. She's kind of like right now, she is like low key giving me like teenager vibes. Like, oh, now you want to talk about me. Like, I've been here this whole time trying to talk to you, and you've just been ignoring me. It's fine, sis. Like, that's the energy I'm getting from her. She's always funny, and I'm so grateful for that. And though I see like why I haven't let her in because I haven't been fully ready to like let my humor in, you know, I haven't been ready for that. And you know, I've started to meet like new guides who just like cracked me up and like made me laugh so hard. I'm like having like a headache moment, which is strange because I don't usually have those. So I must be opening up and onto something. Um, because my body's having new sensations. Also, I did have that intense body work today, which is very good. Um, so I was like, I really want to rework my morning and night routines like so bad. Like this morning, I got up and I wanted to just like get on my phone right away, and I was like, no, don't do it. So I did like literally not even like 10 minutes of like push-ups and like sit-ups and stuff, but just doing something that was for me and not like immediately on my phone. It's like for me, it's like I just always at this point, I just let myself like wake up when I need to wake up, you know? So if it's like if I have something in the morning, sure, I'll set an alarm. But really, like I've found that it's better for my body and it works for my schedule for me to just sleep until I'm up. And like usually that's around 10 a.m. But I find that like I'm always like cued into like my mother's energy who's up way earlier than me. Like her schedule and her body demands call for a different schedule, and that's fine, but I'm always kind of like tapped into her and like then needing to respond to her good morning text that she had sent 2 hours previously. And like for some reason I like still haven't made this like, you know, like I haven't given myself the space in the mornings to just like wake up, do whatever it is I need to be fully ready to get on my phone and text her back. And like, whatever, if that takes 6 hours from the time that she originally sent me the good morning text, then so be it. Like, I know that that is something that's going to benefit me. So I'm just going to again though just keep nurturing a sense of wonder and awe because I mean even just doing like the 5 minutes of like quick body work was much more grounding than you know just getting on my phone. So I you know I'm working with that. So um the next kind of thing is in owning our true gifts and having gratitude. And we're talking about nourishment and what we're feeding ourselves. um yeah, always having gratitude and even about the hard things, and that's the hardest part to have gratitude for, and it's still really important. Um, but this nourishment and like what we're feeding ourselves can tap back into the human design conversation. You know, what kind of information are we letting run in our open centers and in our field. Yeah, just because it's like, just because like I'm open in my heart, I'm open in my solar plexus, doesn't mean that like I can't get off kilter in my sacral. Because like, don't let me do like, do not let it get you twisted. Like, just because you're defined somewhere does not mean you're like running at the highest and best frequencies there. Like, if you're like overflowing like with fears from other people, and you're holding on to all sorts of things that you think you should be doing, and emotional baggage that isn't even yours, but you're trying to process it for your mom, your dad, your brother, your grandma, your best friend, your teachers, that stranger on the train, even, is going to affect what is yours. It's going to like spill over into the things where you are defined, where where you can have identity and love, a sense of self, a sense of where you're going. Like, while that is available to you, if you're all sorts of like caught in other people's stories, and, other people's expectations of like what it means to be a person, well, you're not going to be living your ultimate truth here. And, this is me using my chart as the guidepost. We can go to someone else and we can say, if this person's up in their head thinking about all sorts of things that their friend, the human design master, put in their head, they're trying to answer all the questions that I've left unanswered for them, that's going to spill into like their actual mind, and they're not going to be able to know what their real opinion is. They're not going to see the answers and the insights into like their own self that they really need, because they're all up in here thinking about this. Or if they're worried about, what others think of them. And, this kind of, I want to go into a conversation about self-esteem with the open heart centers here. If they're all caught up in the adrenaline and the rush of the world around them, and they're, just like following the instincts of someone else, they can't really like tap into their, emotional and nervous system strengths as well. They still have access, you still have access to your gifts at all times. And if you're kind of like running off kilter, you're going to, put yourself into like overdrive and things. So um I wanted to go into the heart center and owning our true gifts and working through like some like self-esteem issues. Open heart centers are going to be very susceptible to self-esteem issues. That's not to say people with defined hearts won't also have challenges with those things. Like, everyone's got their thing. It's just open hearts. We don't have willpower. We don't have like, we can't just go out there and just go do it. It's not really like that. It's more about being authentic. It's about being truthful. And it's more about it's more about following um other other energies. As it's like the heart isn't the one that's like moving you into the correct rooms and spaces if your heart is not defined, right? It's like, for this person, working they're noticing their emotional feelings around something in order to move into the correct work and directions. For reflectors, y'all are completely open. So in terms of energy centers, so you're very susceptible to the world around you. You're reflecting to the world, and especially your community that you're associated with, their health and wellness, and as well as having your own obviously health and wellness and personal experience, you are reflecting to your community and you're a reflection of your community. And so for reflectors, they're going to be waiting and they're going to sit through moon cycles. They're going to sit through an entire lunar month in order to know and truly feel the truth of their decision, because through that experience they'll have the experience of having every single one of these other centers filled in, or these other gates filled in, and they'll have, but they have to like sit and they have to wait. It's a very patient experience. The whole human design experience is about patience, and it's about those ideas of wonder and awe and working with your inner child, because you're going to go through the backlog of your experiences. That is important. And like, if you're not really willing to do that, I don't know that I have much for you. Like, I don't know that like I'm gonna be your like favorite channel to watch. Like, I'm just not, because like for me, like I'm constantly checking in with my inner child and with aspects of myself that haven't been integrated into now. And it's having gone to those experiences that has brought me a lot of transformation. So so having patience with ourselves is very key. I want to go into some of the not self questions of an open heart center. So just on like a very basic level, if you have an open heart center, one thing you can do every day when you're working with human design is just ask yourself whatever the not self theme questions are in your chart. That for me was very useful, was just kind of like knowing like, okay, the theme of this is like feeling unworthy and undervalued. Like, am I feeling unworthy? Am I feeling undervalued? Like, is there something I need to prove here? Like, do I think I'm not pretty? Why do I think I'm not pretty enough? Like, those kinds of questions work into the heart center. And the more comfortable you can get with like the uncomfortable answers, I think that the more that you'll start to notice things shift within yourself, because you'll be like, oh, okay, like I do think that I have to prove that I know everything about human design. And it's like, why do you have to? You don't have to know all of that, like, no, like if anybody out there is expecting you to know that, they haven't really probably started learning about anything, I guess, ever in their lives, because, if you're really like a student of something, you're going to be studying it your whole life. If you're teaching something, you're going to be learning it your whole life. That's the beauty. So some of the deeper questions of the undefined heart center. So the not self mind is the spokesperson for the undefined center. So this mind trap starts to take over and speak within your undefined center and telling you what you should say or do in certain situations. So when you start noticing this talk, you can start deconditioning. You can start being like, oh, well, like I don't have anything to prove. So here I am, like I don't have to hold on to like anybody else's fears about survival and intuition, because that just, I don't have to hold on to that. It's like I can understand it and be aware of it being there. I just need to know what my personal instincts are and what my fears are, and knowing that they don't have any sort of like defined way of showing up. So I just got to trust how they are showing up and being open to that being different all the time. So in the heart though, here are some examples of what the mental monologue within the heart might say. I better do this, because if I don't, I won't be worthy. I have to be in control. I have to be brave. I have to pump myself up so I feel worthy and good about myself, and then others will see my value. I have to be loyal so that others will see how valuable I am and so that I can prove how valuable I am. If I just tell it like this and make this promise, then they will see how wonderful I am. If I show them how trustworthy I am, then they will like me. They think I can do this, so I better prove to them that I can. If I am in control, then I can prove my worth. I'm not a good wife, lover, friend unless I prove it. So there's a lot of energy and undefined hearts that can get really caught up in like low self-esteem if it thinks like, hey, I can't live up to these expectations. Like um a big thing with heart energy is commitment. And for me, that's why I say like I'm not overcommitting myself to like doing this conversation on the new moon, every new moon at a certain time until I get into a comfort and a, a safe feeling with it. For me, the commitment is in doing the work and being open to how that shows up in these kind of like new moon crux moments, right? And it's like a lot of challenges for open heart centers, and at least for me, I have noticed this to be true, is that we commit ourselves to things and we say, oh yeah, I'll be there and I'll do that, and then when the time comes around to be there and do that, we're like, what the hell, like that's not for me. An example of this is I have been just like interviewing for different opportunities. I'm just like interested to see what else is out there, maybe see if I can like get some other gigs, other skills, like just make other connections. I think it's cool to go on interviews and such. But I interviewed with this girl over the phone and it was for insurance sales. And I knew in my heart, like, I'm not interested in that work. That doesn't resonate with me. I really think that that would suck my soul. And just, I don't think I'm gonna keep going down the soul sucking path. Like, that's not resonating. But I really vibed with the girl. I was in good spirits. So I scheduled a in-person interview. And the day like rolls around. I mean, I'm cracking up. Like the night before, I'm like, I'm not going to that interview. Like there's like sure, like the practice could be good. And like I feel like I'm wasting their time by going to that and knowing like I'm not interested in that. Um and I want to get and anyway, so I just felt like that was a good example. That's an example though of like my open heart kind of just being like, okay, like I'm gonna commit to that, and then being like, wait a minute, that's not the commitment. Like that's not the correct commitment. And I think though, like over time, like when we make commitments and then break them, like that does wear on our self-esteem. And I think like partially for me, like I'm trying to like work through that with myself, and in honoring my desire to learn more and share more and grow more. I think like honoring this commitment of sharing this sacred templates conversation is important, and I'm grateful to be doing that. um I just realized my lights are going to go out soon, so I just want to kind of just go over some of these like last few things that um we're working through this month and like setting the tone for, and getting into the sacred templates and like understanding our energy more clearly and wholly. We're having some major identity shifts, and this goes back into exploding those matching pictures, and it ties into sharing online a little bit more, and then, getting into sacred imagery rather than, um, I want to say just pornographic and imagery, and and violent imagery, and just what we're kind of inundated with, by, um, the larger forces. Because like, it's like, even like, I don't know, I grew up, like I said, on like Disney and cable culture. So something else I really am like working with is minding my business. I talked a little bit about enmeshment. So, we're working on clearing out those enmeshment patterns. And one thing that I really starting to see as like a like problematic energy that, um one of my trauma patterns held on to is gossip, and like speaking about others when they aren't there, and like that's just totally inappropriate, um and just not something that I am resonating with continuing to do. I do see it as something where I could potentially lose friendships and things. Um, and though it's more important to me to be on the path of God than to like lose fake friends. So if people fall out of my life, if I start standing up to the gossip, well then so be it. And then that leads us into radical acts of forgiving softness. So huge when we're working with these sacred templates and getting into our human design and getting into these like inner child wounds, which we'll step into as we move further into this space together. I'll work through with you sort of how you can backtrack through your different awareness centers and different time periods in your life that you can start seeing patterns and working with your inner child. And in order to do that, we must be forgiving, we must be soft. And these are radical acts. And so right now I'm in the middle of a week about liminal space, which for me is this like in between time. See, I told you my light was going to go out. So yeah, I'm in this like liminal space of like creations. Like I don't even care. It's like I know that like on like social media, it's like, oh my God, you've got to have like the best lighting. I'm like, right now I'm sharing information. It's not about me. It's about the information. So with these radical acts of forgiving softness, and right now I'm in this liminal space of like, I feel like I'm birthing something new, and that's a very tender spot. So, I offer myself so much gratitude and and grace. Um, and so with this, we're also deepening our time with our inner muse, with working with your human design template. You have to be alone. You have to like be in your energy on your own and feel what it feels like to just be alone, you and the planets. This is what the planets were doing yesterday, but it's an example of like my energy mixed with what the planetary energy is doing. And as you can see, with what the planets are doing, I am having solar plexus definition, root definition, and splenic definition, as well as we're all receiving this channel of transitoriness, based on where Venus and Neptune are, and so, what is transitoriness? I'm not going to go like deep into it, but like just starting to like give yourself the information and like letting the information then just sit in your body. Like you don't need to have like all the concepts. We're not intellectualizing things here. Like I spent so long trying to intellectualize things, and like that didn't get me very far. Now it's about embodiment and being and like and understanding in yourself. And in order to do that, you just have to actually like let the information sit and move you through. So anyway, when you're sitting alone, you can then start to looking at where the planets are is important to it, because you'll start to see, okay, so like I have some support in my spleen and in my solar plexus and in my root center that can maybe give me some support and knowing where I am off there. And because of that, it's really putting the spotlight on my heart center and its openness, and I can really get into like that space and explore self-esteem those self-esteem blocks within myself, and when we come back around, maybe like I don't want to, like, again, I don't want to like overcommit myself to things that like I don't um follow through on, because I don't want to keep like letting myself down. But maybe in the group conversation we'll go into a bit of like self-esteem and self-worth, and like how we are bringing those gifts into the world. um and then, yeah, so just like a couple of things, just check in with all of your resources, check in, with your physical resources, your emotional resources, your mental resources, spiritual resources, see where they are, see what needs filled up, see what needs support, and really looking at addictions, at least for me, just kind of like looking into the space where, I'm still caught in like patterns of addiction, and how can I support myself in working through that. I do think like the lights going off was like a very clear, like, this is complete, and I have given as much information as I feel called to for this conversation and this welcome into the sacred templates territory of this beautiful Taurus season in 2023. I am so honored to be back and sharing, and so excited to see like what comes of this, because like even I have no clue. I just know I want to be doing it, and I'm like ready to do it, and I'm ready. I'm excited. So many blessings to you. Hope this resonated, and I look forward to the group conversation.